This is a Gather for Her conversation, and the context of the conversation is an opportunity, an intentional opportunity to explore and share and dive into collective wisdom. We never do really know what's going to show up. We just kind of trust the process. That's what is meant to show up for all of us is going to show up today. So we have just a really basic framework that kind of guides us from going off the rails too much. And before we jump into today's framework and introductions, I wanted to introduce myself for those I haven't met personally. And I'm Charlene SanJenko, and I'm the founder of Powerhouse. And I am lucky enough to be coming to you from Gibsons, BC. And I just want to acknowledge the traditional lands on which I live of the Squamish First Nations. And I just ask that you reflect for a moment on where you call home, where those lands are. And my co-host for these conversations is Christina Benty. And I am going to introduce Christina, and I'll get her to say hello in the chat if perhaps for this morning, for this moment. Christina is a retired politician. She's a jazz singer, and she's the owner of a company called Strategic Leadership Solutions. It's a consulting firm designed to assist teams in developing a culture of excellence in leadership and governance. I'd also like to introduce you to Tina O. Say good morning, Tina, then you'll jump.
Good morning.
Yeah, awesome, good.
Good morning. Just enough time for Zoom to catch me.
That's right. So Tina is a core communications specialist. She works with individuals and organizations who feel called. And she's a storyteller, a performer, a professional listener who works with narrative and story structure as a vehicle for human connection. And she works very closely with Powerhouse. I'd like to introduce Sharon Marshall. Good morning, Sharon. And Sharon, good morning. Sharon's with us from Vancouver Island today. She's an Indigenous entrepreneur and the founder of Diva Training and Staffing Solutions, as well as the founder and president of Creative Collaboration, Inc. Sharon is our graphic recorder and does up some amazing visuals that capture our conversation visually, which we utilize to further ripple it out and share it. And finally, this morning, I want to introduce our guest for today in conversation. Good morning, Nicolle. She's like,
good morning.
Nicolle Nattrass is a wife, mother, actor, director, playwright, dramaturg, speaker, and she's a certified addiction counselor. She's a very interesting mix of a lot of really unique pieces. She is the dramaturg of my one-woman show, Feed the Fire, and I asked her to come on to this conversation this morning alongside Tina to continue to chat about creativity, artistry, what that means, the intersection of where art meets leadership. And when we were describing We Gather for her recently in an application, we gave the description that today's leaders need a braid of wisdom to up-level their perspective, develop responsive skills, and make 7th-generation decisions. So each week we gather with leaders from across sectors, geographical boundaries, and cultural identities to listen. And then together we weave our wisdom for her into the emerging story of us. And that's what you're in for this morning. So I'd love to kick it off by asking Tina and Nicolle asking each of you if you're comfortable using the chat, asking Christina as well. When I see the term, the artistry of impact, how does that land for you? What does that mean to you without trying to think about it here, just maybe thinking about it from here? And why do you think it's important right now? The theme for May's Gather for Her is the artistry of impact. And I'd love to I'd love to ask Nicolle to kick it off if she's willing. And yeah, and anything else that I might have missed in your bio that you'd wanted to add too.
Thank you. I'm excited to jump in. And as you were reading my bio, I was thinking of Christina started talking about baking and how her son is baking cookies. So I was thinking, you know, if my bio was a big bowl and a recipe of all these things, I was trying to think what would be the meal at the end. So thank you for that introduction. It's kind of been a bit interesting to have so many different things intersect career-wise. And as soon as you said 7 generations, to me, when I think of artistry of impact, and I think of 7 generations impact, artists stand up and speak the truth. They use their voice. They are generative. They are the ones who start from scratch, like a recipe, and they spin it together, and they stand up and put their voice out into the world. And I really believe that requires courage and bravery, and change happens when we do that. So when I think of 7 generation changes and impact, is really when we risk, stand up, and speak up. To me, that is the artistry of impact. Yeah.
Oh, you're muted. Hold on.
I couldn't hear you there for a sec.
Sorry. I fully agree. I'm not gonna try to commentate in between. Tina, I'm wondering if you have a different view, or if you'd like to add to that, what comes up for you around the artistry of impact?
I could listen to Nicolle speak for hours, because just you come from such a same yet different lens than mine. I love, excuse me, I love the piece of standing up and speaking the truth. And from my own world, as someone who's like devoting her life right now, has forever, to story, but really diving into myth and diving into the oral tradition. When I think of impact, I think of the stories that we sense through, excuse me, I'm just going to mute for a sec. We'll have a little cough. There we go. It's almost like, for me, impact is how art changes us. And we can't even name it until it's changed us. And we might not even be able to look back and say, it happened here. It happened at this story. It happened at this show. We might not be able to, but it changes us because it speaks to us on a non-cognitive level. Like, it calls out our soul and says, I see you. I hear you. Let's talk. So for me, it's that as I dive into oral tradition, it's like what happened at the fire circle. You can't mistake the stories that we're surrounded by, that we can't put words to, but you can hear just the same. And that's the impact. For me, it's almost like adding the waves of words out there that you can only hear if you're through art.
Cool. When I and Christina, I'm going to encourage you to add your comments in the, oh, there she is. Okay, I'm unmuting you. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. No longer a blank screen. Well, I love what's been said already about the artistry of impact. But when I think of artistry, I actually think that that oftentimes we pigeonhole artistry and we don't necessarily realize that our creativity has so many different forms, right? And how it shows up in the world. Like I hear from people lots of times, oh, I'm not very creative. I'm like, yeah, 10 minutes. Let me ask you a couple questions. Yeah, you are. Right? And it shows up in such a variety of ways. And so recognizing it as the artistry of how you are in the world and how your creativity is reflected in whatever work that you do. And oftentimes I work with a lot of technical folks, right? In the engineers and finance people and again, 10 minutes, a 10-minute conversation, and I can pull out their artistry and see how their creativity actually contributes to, or they don't necessarily recognize it, but how it contributes to the impact that they make in their industry. So.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to turn to everyone that's on the call this morning. If you've got something starting to bubble up, no pressure, but I'm curious what, and we'll read out the answers if you're willing to add any. What is the term, the artistry of impact, mean to you? And I just kind of want to second what Christina said, in that it's funny how in the past we've pigeonholed things, right? Like you remember growing up in school. In school, you were either a jock, or you were super smart, or you were a theater geek, or like there was these very definite pockets, and I remember meeting Christina, and one of the things that I loved about her was the fact that she was a mayor, and she was this wicked jazz singer. And I'm like, I love that. Like I can relate to you. And for me, the artistry of impact just means like, if we can encourage each other to explore all the different sides of ourselves, that just encourages us to bring all of us to a situation. And so it is when I remember that I that I do like to sing, or I love to write, or I love to be silly, actually, that I can do all of that and still show up and be professional, whereas like for so long we had to put it in compartments, right?
Can I jump in on that, Char?
Please.
I just think that there's something about that, and I agree that with creativity, it's almost like we want to pigeonhole it, and it's so true. And it's interesting just that I started the conversation by saying that, because when I think of my bio, I think for so long people wanted to pigeonhole me, like in interviews. Oh, so you're an actor? Well, I'm a writer too. Oh, so you do plays? No, I write my own work. Oh, so you only write your own work? No, like it, it's this idea, right, of creativity. And part of where I come from in my heart and in my head is that, we can do anything creatively, right? To the recipe analogy is, I have one of my friends who can come over to your house, any of your cupboards right now, when you have no food. She can open up your cupboards and I'll say, there's nothing you can eat here. I mean, I have nothing. I have to go to the grocery store. She'll open it up, take out like 6 different ingredients, and you'll think, oh my God, I don't know if I can eat that. And she'll make you the most beautiful recipe ever. It's that creative, right? Like, what do we create? I think anything in creativity is about, we're starting from this place, we're adding all these things together, and we're delivering it, whether we deliver it on the stage, to the marketplace, in a book, in a gallery, with a friend, in our feedback. Like there's the artistry of impact is huge. And I think we have not seen it because we've needed to pigeonhole everything, right? And then the idea of just throwing this in there, that I think we're getting back to this idea where you're allowed to have a hobby. My mom likes to play the piano. She's not going to be a Carnegie pianist, but it gives her joy, and she's super creative, right? So it's getting away from that idea of you have to be the most, an American Idol in order to be creative, right? It's challenging all those things. And artistry for me of social impact is really important, because then we're impacting people's lives to reflect on where they're at and go, what can I do? What can I change? What action can I take?
I love that.
Can I jump in for a second? Because
Yeah.
I love that, Nicolle. That's just so delicious. And I think about, even in my own work, I often tell my clients, your political life, politics it's an art and a science. It's two sides of the same coin, right? And so when you're crafting policy, there's an artistry involved that has an impact. It has to be steeped in science, of course, but it's the artistry that actually leads to either a positive outcome or a negative outcome. And so I often talk to my clients about the art and science of politics. You want a linear process. It's not linear. It's lateral. It's messy. It's the artistry of policy crafting that makes a difference. And so that's super cool.
Tina, I'm going to kind of jump into the next piece of the conversation, but I'm just wondering, just before I do, is there anything that you heard that jumps out to you? Anything you'd like to reflect back or dig into further?
I just want to name the pain point of pigeonholing. That seemed, however we want to call it, the division, the two sides, really, that's really present right now, that there's this idea of, so then I can hear that the desire to kind of, move into the mist, if you will, right? Into the mess.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. Well, I'd like to segue a tiny bit or continue on this path, and I'm going to kick off this next section by just basically what I said on social media, because I'd like to actually start to talk about the process specifically. So, artistry. Now I'm actually wanting to talk about performing arts, and my experience of this one woman show. I made a pretty bold statement on social media that I said I believe every woman leader should seriously consider writing and performing a one woman show. And Nicolle, I'm curious from your point of view, like, why on earth do you think I'd have the goal to say something like that? I'm curious your thoughts as someone who's been involved in this for a very long time, but also from what you just said around social impact. I'm just curious.
Well, first of all, I loved it. I love that you said that, and it didn't take me aback at all. Of like, because I think that it's about being called. And Sharon, actually, I was speaking with her, or someone I was speaking with recently said, if you, exactly what you said in Feed the Fire, which is, if you were not called, you wouldn't be compelled. And I think we're in positions as women leaders we're called, and so therefore we're compelled. And I think when you're compelled, you don't have a choice anymore to go, you know what, I'm gonna just not do that. I'm just gonna step away. Stepping up is key. And my experience working on solo shows, my own shows, helping other people with their solo shows, is you don't write a solo show about something that you kind of enjoy. It has to be like, I am super passionate about this. I have to say this. I'm compelled to say this. You can't, no one writes a show about something, I can give or take it, I can take or leave it. There's something about that. And when I go back, when you said that, about women being committed to writing a solo show, you know what it made me think of? It made me think of why I wrote my first solo show. Like, I went back to that point, and it was because I looked around me, and while I loved performing other people's words, I love playwrights, absolutely, as a dramaturg, I hold them in my heart. I was performing all these shows of other people's words, and I couldn't see myself. I couldn't hear my truth. I couldn't hear the stories that I needed to hear. And so I thought, I need to tell this story. And I think there's something about that in social impact. We need to make sure that we're hearing all the stories, not just one part of this story. And so my desire to step out when I was 20, whatever, and write my first show was about me saying, there has to be other people out here who have this story in their heart, in their head, in their heart, and I need to reflect it to them. And honestly, I didn't know that to be certain. I wasn't confident of it. So it was like standing on the edge of the cliff, right? Like the fool in the tarot card going with the rose, looking at the rose and going, hope it goes okay, and not knowing again. So the level of risk is huge, huge. And yet, when we dare to step out and tell the story, whatever story we need to tell, and I keep going to my heart, the heart and head story, what happens is it's universal, and it opens up this whole other freedom for other people to go, I get that. That's my story too. That's part of my story. And so there's an interconnectedness that happens. I know I'm kind of all over the map here, but I think that's what happened with Feed the Fire, right? Is that you managed to say through your story to step up and out and use your voice to actually interconnect, to connect on a larger scale. And it's so needed right now. I mean, let's not even to get into the whole patriarchy and years and years and years of history where women are erased from history. No stories. It's really important.
I love that. I'm gonna punt it over to Christina. I just wanted to pull one little piece of that out and just say, I love what you said about it's a vehicle that basically helps us to explore interconnectivity. Because we talk a lot about it, and we're trying to find ways to unite, but like, what's the vehicle? Like, what's the how? What's the fitness machine to go and use, right? So, Christina, what did you pull out of? What thoughts did you pull out?
Well, a couple things that I really gravitated towards, and that is one of them about Nicolle talking about the fact that sometimes delivering other people's stuff, when you can't see yourself in it, then it disconnects you from it doesn't feel, there's a lack of integrity there. And I've had that experience before, not with plays, but other things where I was supposed to be presenting someone else's stuff, and I was like, I actually don't, my soul's not here. And I remember thinking, I will never do that again. It has to be my own stuff, which requires a intensive birthing process of creativity, regardless of how that shows up. Like, if I'm on stage talking about asset management, there's a birthing process that has to happen before I get up to the stage, because I have to be delivering my own stuff. And so that landed for me. The other thing was just then the interconnectedness, me watching something and seeing myself in it, and how that story connects to me. I think that's really beautiful. It kind of comes back to, and Margaret Wheatley said this. She said, we don't she said some version of this. We don't vilify people whose stories we know, right? And when we know somebody's story, that connects us to them. It humanizes others. And in humanizing other, it drops the us and them, and it really brings us back to the we, who we are, and that we're all connected. So sitting down and hearing people's stories, I think, is really important. And that comes back to what you were saying about the story, that how important it is to actually tell your story in whatever modality that you create. And so Char's challenge around the, write a one-woman show, and even if you just do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for your friends. Connect your story so that people can see your heart and soul. And can I go just a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Here's the piece I think in organizational culture all over the place is that we fail to humanize one another in teams. And when you don't do that, and I see this all the time, when we fail to do that in our teams, and we don't know what drives people and we don't know what their stories are, we make up stories. Our brain fills in the gap. We make up stories about people, and we then we start to finger point and blame, and we don't connect. We don't connect the dots very well. So storytelling is really key.
Mm-hmm.
I told Tina a story one time about a person who she's a friend of mine, but she can be a bit off-putting. And somebody was complaining to me about her one time, and I said, you know what? If you knew her backstory, she could spit in your face, and you would have all the grace and love for her, because she just so desperately needs it. And so that's an expansion version of storytelling, knowing one another's stories.
I love that. Yeah, I think, I mean, I think any vehicle that we can have that deepens our understanding of who we are, and who we are with each other. Like, we're really about exploring, how do we be with each other differently moving forward? And so this is a piece. Maybe it's not all doing a bunch of woman shows. Maybe it is, but the key is, how are we taking the time to have a deeper understanding of someone's story, to help to help connect us at a deeper level. Nicolle, I'm going to reflect a couple of things, and then I'd love to kind of bat it back to you about the process, about the actual process that we've been kind of embarking on. Just a couple of reflections for me and in my journey. The first thing that kind of excited me was I thought back to when I was in my, when I was 12, and what I loved to do was perform. I was that kid that was always doing plays in school, and not even theater. These were just plays in a small school, but and how much joy I had from doing that. And then I also combined that with the question that I love asking women and friends is, like, I immediately want to know what somebody stands for. I just want to know, like, what do you stand for? Like, what's this all about for you? And so I guess to reflect back to Nicolle, it's that I'm always interested in knowing someone's truth, and if they're brave enough to say what that is, and if they know it. So I think that one woman show attracted me because it gives you that opportunity to have that conviction, and it is a vehicle that kind of puts you at a bit of risk, and I think in doing that helps to kind of push you at the edges in terms of where that also shows up in the other areas that it needs to, as we're leading. I'm not sure there's enough places to exercise the risk. Yeah, but I'm curious, Nicolle, on when you reflect on the process of like from the commitment, like having the commitment to do it, and kind of if you could take people a little bit from a dramaturg point of view through the process of what it's like.
To start from scratch and spin
Yeah.
the gold.
Yeah.
You know, the other word is creative alchemy. That's a word that has been coming to me. And I think that creative alchemy happens in everywhere. The process of creative alchemy, you know, again, all the ingredients coming together, becoming something, the alchemy of it. But really it starts with an idea. It starts with a conviction. It starts with compelling. It starts with being called. I think everything that you said is so true, Char, that you're in a position where you want to share what you stand for, right? I think the inspiration to stand up and do a solo show is unique to everyone. My first solo show was anger. Like it was a reaction to being angry and being so angry that no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of this feeling and I needed to channel it. That was my first solo show. So I think the inspiration is different for everyone, but I think the commonality is I have something to say. I have to say this. I have to share this. Again, it's that compelling need. And then it's starting to generate the material, like you and I work together, really working on not censoring yourself and not editing, right? Like starting to generate the material, and that this idea of not pigeonholing is so important in the creative process, because we can have it in our mind like, this is what it's going to be. This is the show that it's going to be, right? When my first solo show, I thought, this is the show it's going to be. I'm 28. I need to be a feminist. I couldn't write anything from that mindset because I was already telling myself, this is what it is. So there needs to be an idea of what it is, but you also need to be open to, as Tina would say, letting the story show up to what it wants to be. That's the creative alchemy piece. It's a messy. It's a we think it's one thing, and some people start with an outline, some people don't. Some people, you know, like Tina is very immersive, where she'll just kind of write a whole draft. Other people might start with one idea, again, on an index card and have a box of ideas. So, you know, there's so many different processes to it, right? I'm curious as to what your process was, maybe, Char.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the recipe cards, because I want to pull it back to everybody that is on the call. And I think if you know, regardless of what the outcome is, you know, like I think the point is like, let's encourage a process that helps you get clearer and clearer about what your truth is, how you feel comfortable talking about that, and then starting to look for vehicles to express that. The recipe cards were and are a game changer for me, and because they take the overwhelm out. So I keep a box beside me, and every time I get a creative idea that might be used for something, I'll jot it down, and I learned that from you. And other times, depending on the mood, I also have used the big journals, like the kids like scrapbook kind of journals, the cheapies, you know, and I just write really big, and I fill a page. Like, I guess that's more of a big brain dump, but
Yeah,
you know, like, and again, I think it's the process of unlocking and just being able to answer that question, like just being able to answer that call of like, what's important to you? Like, what are you deeply convicted about? And you know, how does that show up in the world? Like, what does that actually look and feel like to you as it shows up? Because you never know, once you start going down this path, what starts to unlock and unfold. And I think it's I just think it's a really exciting process.
It's a process of trust, right? Trusting your own voice, trusting your own process. And I think as a dramaturg that I hold the space for that. So at times when I've worked with a dramaturg, it's because I'm so in it and I'm so here that you're on this hairy edge, almost as it were, at times with your truth. And you need someone to say, no, I hear you, I'm gonna hold this. So my role as a dramaturg is to really listen to the solo artist, listen to the writer, and to find out, hold the vision so that we stay on that track, right? But it is really, it's a beautiful, beautiful process, and it's a unique process to everyone. There's so much I could say about it. And I think the most important idea is that it's tuning into the irreplaceability. There's something about the irreplaceability of everyone's unique message that is actually universal. So even though it's like a very specific message that you have a specific story in Feed the Fire, you're hitting a universal message that can appeal and impact everyone.
Thank you. I'm going to ask T to kind of give us one bite to sort of kind of round out the conversation, start to bring it to a close. But I loved what you said about the universal message, and I think I was trying to think of a way to put this out appropriately, but I'll just say it anyway. How I feel right now is if anything was to happen to me, I'm good. What I have to say is out there. And I think, we talk about legacy, or we talk about, whatever. And I think, don't, it's sort of like there's that, don't go to bed angry. Well, I'll just make up another saying, but you probably know what I'm going to say, right? Like, don't wait to put what you have to say out to the world. Life is short. And I honestly feel like it's going to keep unfolding for me and stuff, but what I have to say is out there now. Like, I'm good. I'm good. And I really encourage people to think about that. Yeah. Don't. And Karen said, don't keep just sharpening the skates, right?
That was awesome.
And I think, let me add to that, Charlene, that there's something really beautiful about that. First of all, it's a beautiful statement and very true. And also there's a responsibility piece, right? That you are okay with being responsible for what you've put out, right? That's huge. It's not like, I just did this thing and I'm throwing it, I'm not responsible for it. There's an idea of it being filled with integrity, that you've thought about it, that you've worked through it, that I'm responsible for this, and I'm okay to release this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really, really important about the artistry of social impact. It's not just throwing something out for the sake of, this is an idea that I think is funny. I mean, I have plenty of ideas that are not appropriate to be released out into the world. It's about being conscious and grounded in values and integrity and authenticity. And there's a self-responsibility that artistry that we have for artistry of impact.
Mm-hmm. T, I want to pull our conversation to a close, and I'm wondering if there's one thought or question you'd like us to do a bit of a roundtable on, and then the plan from here is to just stop recording, turn it into a interactive conversation, and for anyone that can stay on. But yeah, any thoughts to help us close?
I always say, and you've heard me say it, that everything you're supposed to hear happens in the first 5 minutes, and then you spend the next hour unpacking what that really means. And we opened on pigeonholing, And interestingly enough, the last piece that like it's humming, like I just can't not hear it, is when Nicolle said the irreplaceability, the irreplaceability. And then I went to the knowing of interconnectedness, and then the knowing of the embodiment of one person's show is you're physically embodying your irreplaceability, and you're giving it to the world on this time and plane of our humanity. It's like where our irreplaceability is seen, and then in that we are interconnected. And the visual that I saw was like a circle of lights, and so as we are irreplaceable in the circle of light.
Mm-hmm.
And as we stand in our show, our light just goes on or is brighter, but we are irreplaceable, and that's our interconnection. Our stories are all connected. So opening on pigeonholing, oddly enough, is like the unhealthy side of irreplaceability, and the healthy side is irreplaceable. And that's how, but we're all interconnected either way. How do we want to hold that light? So I would invite us to go into the conversation of irreplaceable and interconnectedness and see where that takes us. Because there is that interesting edge, right? Of like where Nicolle just went about, there's lots of funny things I could say, but are they rooted in my values? And there's nothing wrong with it. But it's like, how many chocolate chip cookies am I going to eat today? Versus this piece of dark chocolate. So I would go there. Yeah.
Very cool. Christina, anything to add into that?
Boy, Tina did such a fantastic job of kind of pulling everything together. I don't think I really have anything to add. I love, connected all the dots quite succinctly and beautifully.
Thank you. Well, I'm gonna ask Nicolle to have a kind of the last word. I think she's like, pick me. Yeah. Where does this leave you? Where does this leave you, this conversation?
Thank you, Tina, for that, connecting that, because you know where it leaves me? It leaves me, I'm so excited that you asked me to share, to where we needed to be, why we were, I'm so excited I can't talk, where we were in the fire circle, reclaiming the human spirit. Because if irreplaceability, everything that we have is irreplaceable, is our interconnectedness, that's our human spirit, no? And then this is where we're at. We're reclaiming that. We're remembering that. We're asserting that. We're stepping out in that, asking, how can we do that? And I think that's kind of what you're asking in your show, Feed the Fire, is like, how can we do this, guys? Right? We have a choice. We can do this or this. So in a way, this conversation has brought us back to Feed the Fire, the message in your show.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. Oh, love that. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you, Nicolle, Tina, Christina. There's so much more that we could say